Have you ever noticed that some years do not simply feel busy or difficult, but feel like the entire emotional temperature of the world has risen at once, as if politics, markets, technology, conflict, ambition, and human impatience all suddenly decide they are done waiting and want movement now? And let me ask you something more direct. If 2026 is carrying a double fire structure inside an already fire-dominant period 9 environment, do you really think the world gets a calm year where institutions politely sort themselves out? Or do you think everything already unstable starts moving faster than people are prepared for? Exhale sharply, and if a year like this does not create chaos out of nothing, but instead accelerates whatever is already weak, overheated, performative, or overdue for collapse, are you prepared to read that properly? Or are you still hoping this is just another dramatic forecast people can safely ignore? Stay with me until the end of this video for 3 reasons. First, I'm going to show you why 2026 deserves to be taken seriously as a high heat year instead of being reduced to lazy zodiac entertainment. Second, I'm going to break down the 3 stages of the fire cycle so you can understand how the energy unfolds instead of treating the whole year like one long blur. And third, I'm going to show you how to work with this kind of year truthfully, because a lot of people will either panic, fantasize, or posture, and all 3 responses are useless. And if conversations like this help you understand timing, pattern, and the real pressure behind the year, instead of just reacting to headlines after the damage is already done, click like, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with other people who need a more intelligent way to think about 2026. Now, let's reset the frame properly. A lot of people hear fire horse year and immediately run in one of 2 stupid directions. One group acts like it is mystical theater, as if the year is some cosmic horror trailer designed to scare weak minds into paralysis. The other group treats it like decorative astrology content, as if this is just another colorful label to use in posts before they go back to living exactly the same way. Both miss the point. A high fire year is not automatically good, and it is not automatically bad. It is dangerous in the way that high acceleration is dangerous. If the vehicle is sound, the driver is honest, and the direction is clear, acceleration can create breakthrough. If the structure is weak, the ego is inflated, and the movement is driven by panic or vanity, acceleration simply gets you to the crash faster. That is what 2026 is. Not a superstition, not a morality play, an accelerant, and that is why the year matters. In classical terms, 2026 carries Bingwu, yang fire, over horse, which means the heavenly stem is fire and the earthly branch is also carrying strong fire. That already makes it a year of amplified heat, visibility, exposure, and movement. Then you place that inside period 9, which is itself a fire cycle, and now you are not just dealing with one spark, you are dealing with a larger era already dominated by themes of technology, image, speed, exposure, branding, emotional volatility, and the collapse of quiet stability. In other words, the year is not arriving into a neutral environment, it is arriving into a world already burning in multiple directions. That is why I say 2026 is not the year the world randomly catches fire. It is the year the world becomes unable to pretend the fire was small. Now let's talk about the first stage of this cycle. Because if you do not understand the early part of the year properly, you will misread everything that follows. The first stage is ignition. This is the period where the energy begins gathering force and starts revealing where movement has been delayed for too long. Usually people imagine ignition as dramatic, but real ignition often begins more subtly than that. It looks like rising impatience. It looks like stalled systems suddenly becoming harder to tolerate. It looks like projects, tensions, frustrations, and ambitions that were manageable in a quieter year, now beginning to demand action. The reason for this is simple. Fire does not like stagnation. It does not like half-life. It does not like endless drift disguised as planning. So what happens in this stage is that whatever has been waiting starts pushing harder. At a personal level, that may look like career restlessness, pressure to finally act, emotional honesty becoming unavoidable, or relationships no longer tolerating false balance. At a business level, it may look like markets moving faster, messaging becoming more important, pressure on visibility increasing, and weak offers or weak positioning getting exposed more quickly. At a geopolitical level, it may look like leaders taking harder postures because the environment begins rewarding decisive movement over procedural caution. This is where many people make the first big mistake. They feel the ignition and mistake it for permission to react blindly. That is stupid. Ignition is not an order to panic. It is a signal that the year will not tolerate endless delay. But that does not mean every urge deserves action. Some people will feel the pressure of the year and start too many projects, make too many promises, overestimate their readiness, or assume that fast movement automatically means correct movement. That is how the year starts burning people before it has even reached full force. The right response in ignition is selection. You do not chase every spark. You choose what deserves fuel. Now let's move to the second stage, because this is the part people should respect most. The second stage is the inferno. This is where the year stops suggesting and starts exposing. It is where the heat peaks. It is where weak structures, weak identities, weak systems, weak governments, weak business models, and weak emotional self-control start paying for whatever they ignored earlier. In a fire year, exposure is not theoretical. Fire reveals, it makes hidden things public. It amplifies consequences. It raises speed and emotional visibility at the same time. That combination is brutal. Why? Because people do not just make mistakes. They make them in a more visible environment. Businesses do not just struggle. They struggle in markets that move faster and judge faster. Leaders do not just overreach. They overreach in conditions where ego, optics, and reaction are already overheated. This is why I say the world catches fire in 2026, not because the year is evil, but because too much of the world is already structurally dishonest, emotionally unstable, politically performative, or strategically overextended. Fire does not create all of that. It forces it into the light. And this is where the comforting nonsense has to stop. A lot of people want to hear that 2026 is a year of transformation in some soft, inspirational way. Fine, but transformation is not always graceful. Sometimes transformation means the illusion gets burned first. Sometimes the thing that transforms is the false identity you were still trying to live inside. Sometimes the thing that changes is the system that should have broken earlier but was still being artificially maintained by delay, denial, or cheap optimism. That is why the inferno stage can feel harsh, because it is harsh. The year does not negotiate with what is already dead. It removes it. Now, does that mean everything collapses? No, but it does mean this is not a year where sloppy people, weak leaders, fragile startups, fake experts, and performative brands can assume they will be protected by slow consequence. The whole point of the year is that consequence speeds up. That is why this stage is dangerous. Not because it makes life impossible, but because it makes evasion expensive. Now, if this is helping you see the year more clearly, instead of just more dramatically, click like, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with other people who need a more adult conversation about what 2026 actually is. Now let's talk about the final stage, because if the inferno is where exposure peaks, the last stage is where truth settles. The third stage is embers. This is the stage many people underestimate, because they assume the danger is over once the visible heat reduces. That is immature thinking. Embers are where you finally see what the fire really did. The smoke clears, the pace changes, the adrenaline drops, and suddenly the question is no longer what is burning, but what remains. This is the stage of integration, consequence, rebuilding, and sober assessment. If the year forced you into the right action, the ember stage can bring clarity, momentum, and new structural honesty. If the year burned away what should never have been fed in the first place, this stage can feel cleaner, calmer, and more grounded. But if you spend the year reacting emotionally, showing off, burning yourself out, or building movement without direction, this stage can feel like the bill arriving after the party. That is why embers matter. They tell you whether the year refined you or simply exhausted you. At a personal level, this is where people begin to understand what the year really changed in them. At a business level, this is where companies can see whether the visibility, speed, and transformation they chased actually created stronger foundations or just more fatigue. At a global level, this is where the consequences of leadership overreach, policy arrogance, conflict escalation, and institutional strain become harder to hide behind rhetoric. So when I say 2026 is the year the world catches fire, I am not trying to sound clever. I am saying something very simple. The world is already overloaded with unresolved heat. 2026 increases the speed, the visibility, and the consequence of that. Now let's be brutally practical about how to work with the year, because knowing the stages means nothing if your response is still childish. In ignition, the discipline is selection. Pick what deserves movement and stop pretending everything urgent is important. In the inferno, the discipline is grounding. Protect your health, your structure, your timing, your message, and your emotional center. This is not the year to let adrenaline become your personality. In the embers, the discipline is integration. Do not rush to refill the space. Learn from what was exposed. Build from truth, not from impatience. And let me say one more thing clearly. This is not the year to chase fake visibility. Fire rewards, real visibility, built on substance. It humiliates empty performance. If you have real work, real insight, real value, and real discipline, this year can push you forward faster than expected. But if you are loud without structure, visible without depth, or ambitious without integrity, then the year is more likely to expose you than elevate you. That is not cruelty. That is just how heat works. Now let's bring this home properly. Why does 2026 matter? Because it is not just another year of noise, motion, and global confusion. It is a year where all of that becomes more compressed, more exposed, and more consequential. The Firehorse year inside period 9 does not politely ask the world to evolve. It increases the pressure until what is false, delayed, or unstable becomes harder to maintain. That is why I call it the year the world catches fire. Not because everything ends, because everything speeds up. What should move, moves faster. What should break, breaks faster. What should be seen becomes visible faster. And what should never have been left unattended starts demanding a price. That is the truth of the year. The opportunity is real. The danger is real. And the difference between breakthrough and damage will come down to whether people respond with discipline, clarity, and truth, or with ego, panic, and reaction. If this gave you a sharper and more truthful way to understand 2026, click like, subscribe to this channel, and share it with other people who need more than decorative astrology and more than fear-based nonsense. And if you want deeper conversations about Chinese metaphysics, timing, period 9, leadership, business pressure, and how to read years like this with more precision, join the Destiny Architect Telegram chat, where we continue these discussions with people who want clarity instead of